Right. We stopped yesterday at this, where we looked at an example where we're reading into integer values, converting it to integers, and we had two if statements to determine which one is the larger value. And then I showed if a value, if you only have one of two possible conditions, then you can use an else. So if it's false, it will come to the else part. Right. So remember, if the condition is true, it will come to this part and it will ignore the rest. If it is false, if this condition is false, it will never come here. It will just skip to the else part. So today we are going to be looking at a few more programs with regard to condition or not. So let's look at a valid triangle. Let's look at this question. Read the question, guys. Right. Read in the three angles of a triangle and determine in an output whether it is a valid triangle or not. So what exactly is a valid triangle? A valid triangle is any triangle where if you add all angles of the triangle, you should get 180 degrees. Any triangle. The sum of the three angles would be 180 degrees. If it is not 180 degrees, then it's not a valid triangle. So, right. So once again, the question, read in the three angles of the triangle. Now here we go. We need three angles, right? So our input is three angles, and our output is either going to be valid triangle or not a valid triangle. So we're going to read in the three angles of the triangle. Now, this is what we've been doing normally, right? So I'm just going to go with angle 1. Angle 1 is assigned input, enter first angle, right? Then we're going to go with angle 2 is assigned input, enter second angle. And lastly, angle 3 is assigned input, enter third angle. Okay, once again, and I know I'm saying this again and again every day, every lesson I tell you this. When you use the input method, you are reading in a string. So what do we have to do? At the moment, angle 1, angle 2, and angle 3 are strings. we need to make them integers, right? So we are going to cast each one into an integer. How do we cast? Int, and it will be angle 1. Now, just to remind you, at this point, angle 1 is a string. After this statement is executed, angle 1 becomes of type integer. Now, I'm going to show you something a little different today with regards to input, right? So that's casting angle 2. Angle 3 is assigned int angle 3. Now, I want you to look at this. We've got the casting here. We're reading it as an string here. Now you see this int. I can actually take that int and put it in front here. So check this out. Don't forget the double brackets. Now, what's happening here? There, angle is going to be input as a string. Then int will cast it into an integer. And at that point, angle 1 becomes an integer, which basically means that these parts we don't need anymore. In fact, it's good programming to actually cast it as you are inputting. I hope that doesn't confuse anybody, right? So basically input and casting are taking place at the same time. It makes our programs shorter. So once again, the input will read it in as a string, the int will cast it into an integer, and angle 1 will be an integer. So will angle 2 and angle 3. Now, once again, what is the just what is the sum of a normal triangle? The sum of the three angles must be 180 degrees. So we need to find the sum, right? We are going to call that variable angle sum. Angle sum is assigned angle 1 plus angle 2 plus angle 3. So this variable contains the sum of the three angles. Now that was basically input and casting and calculating the sum. Now here's the thing, guys. What must angle sum be for it to be a valid triangle? Now remember, I told you yesterday that if we're going to use a message variable, we need to give it an initial value of an empty string. An empty string is basically two single quotes, right? Or two double quotes. It doesn't make a difference because we are going to be using it inside the if and the else part. So when we, before an if statement, when we give a variable a value, we call it initializing. So I'll just put this in here. Initialize message to empty string. Start the 8. Right. Now, if angle sum, how do we check equality? Equal, equal, yes? if angle sum is equal to 180, then colon, then message is assigned. This is a valid triangle. Now, if it's not 180, then we have an else part. Now, remember, the else part will only take place if the condition is false. So here, message is assigned. This is not a valid triangle. Okay, so we're reading in three angles, reading it as a string, casting it to int. Then we come and calculate the sum of the three angles, initialize our message variable, check if the angle sum is 180. If it is, then message takes on the string. This is a valid triangle. If the condition is false, then it's going to come to the else part. Okay, so let's go and run it. Well, okay, what is the problem? Okay, let's just go. It's equal. Oh, that is Delphi Pro. Okay, so I'm just going to go and put, let's see if it's a valid triangle firstly. So 50 plus 100 plus 30. If you add that, we're going to get 180. So, okay, why don't I have an output? Because I did not put my print statement here. Okay, so, right, so let's go again, 50, 100, and 30. And that's a valid triangle. Now, if I'm going to enter 30 and 20 and 60, that's 110 degrees. It's not a valid triangle. Okay, so if you look at what we're doing over here, the input, all of you should be able to input, all of you should be able to do that. This is the new stuff we started learning yesterday. So you need to understand how you're going to construct your conditions now. These are simple if else statements. Right. So let's close that. And that. Okay. Let's go look at this. Reading a year in the format, now that 4Ys basically means you're reading it as 4 digits, and determining an output whether it is a leap year or not. So what is the definition of a leap year? A leap year, right? A leap year is any year that's divisible by 4. For example, the year 2000, the year 2020. 2021 is obviously not divisible by 4. So when you want to determine whether a number is divisible by another number, how do we determine that? So I want you to think about this, guys. If I told you 12 divided by 4, 12 divided by 4 is 3. What's your remainder? Nothing. If I told you 10 divided by 2, 10 divided by 2, just going to show you this, right? 10 integer division 2, it's 5. Now, if I said 10 mod 2, what's your remainder? 0. I told you 12 divided by 4, it's 3. And if I said 12 mod, I want to check the remainder. 4, it's 0. So if one number is divisible by another number, the remainder is always 0. So we need to firstly input the year. So let's call it here is assigned. Remember, we're going to cast our input, and in our input, our state message is basically going to say enter a year, right? Now, just remember that is your input, and casting. Now, I want to determine whether the variable year is divisible by 4. So remember, if the year is divisible by 4, the remainder is going to be 0. And fortunately, we actually have an arithmetic operator to determine the remainder. So let's go and call it remainder is assigned year mod 4. So this variable will store the remainder. So what are we doing over there? We are getting the remainder. Now, once again, if the remainder is 0, it means the year is divisible by 4. That means that year is a leap year. So once again, message is assigned an empty string. And now we have our condition. What is our condition? We need to check that the remainder is 0. Because if the remainder is equal to 0, then message is assigned the year. I'm converting it to string, remember that, is a leap year. Now, if the remainder is not 0, then else message is assigned, once again, cast our year as string plus is not a leap year. Okay. So just remember, if one number is divisible by another number, then the remainder should always be 0. And Forget the print statement this time. Print our message. Okay, so we are getting the year as a string, we casting it as an integer, and we are dividing year by 4 and getting the remainder. If the remainder is 0, that means this year that was input is divisible by 4. So if the remainder is 0, it's a leap year. If it's not 0, then it's not a leap year. Let's go try it out. Remember I told you 2020 is a leap year. There we go. Because it's divisible by 4. All right. Let's go put 2021. 2021 is not a leap year because it's not divisible by 4. So just to show you exactly what I'm talking about, okay, I'm going to come here and display the remainder so you can see remainder equals plus str remainder. So we can see each time what the remainder is. Okay, so right, so let's go and enter the year 2040, which is around 19 years from now. Can you see? Remainder is 0, therefore it is a leap year. Right? Let's try it again. Let's go and put 2033. Remainder is 1. So it's not a leap year. So just remember, if your remainder is 0, that means it's a leap year. All right? So in that same vein, guys, of programming, right, we can check whether a number is even or odd. Okay, read it an integer value and determine whether it is even or odd. So what's the definition of an even number? Guys, what's the definition of an even number? Come on, give me examples of even numbers. 2, 6, 10, 20, 200, 1000, right? Now, an even number is divisible by 2. Now, remember in the previous program, if a number is divisible by 4, the remainder is what? 0, right? So if it is divisible by 2, the remainder will be 0. So if it's divisible by 2, if the remainder is 0, it means that it's an even number. So let's go. Oh, by the way, take any number that is odd and you divide it by 2, your remainder will always be 1. Do I have the, no. Okay, let's just run this. Right, let me show you what I'm talking about. If I told you 2 mod 2, remainder is 0. If I told you 3 mod 2, remainder is 1. If I told you 13 mod 2, 13 is an odd number, guys. remainder is 1. If I told you 25 mod 2, remainder is 1. If I told you 90 mod 2, remainder is 0. So you'll notice that if it's divisible by 2, remainder is 0. So when you divide any number by 2, if the remainder is 0, it means it's an even number. If the remainder is 1, it means it's an odd number. Now, there are different ways of actually doing this. Let me show you. Okay, so we are going to input our number. I'm just going to call it num. Is a sign int. We're going to cast. Then we're going to input, enter, and integer value. Okay, so that's input and casting. Okay, so we input. Now I need to find the remainder. Oh, okay, we need to find the remainder. So remainder, okay. Remainder is assigned num mod 2. Now, what must the remainder be for it to be an even number? Right? So we're going to come here. It's still processing. So message is assigned an empty string. If remainder equal 0, that means if the remainder is 0, now remember, when you divide any number by 2, the remainder is either going to be 0 or 1, nothing else, right? Take any number divided by 2, the remainder is always going to be either 0 or 1. So if remainder is equal to 0, that means that, right, is an even number. Now, if the remainder is not 0, else, what does that mean? It means that the number input is an odd number. And print our message. Okay, so we're inputting it as a string, casting it into an integer, we're dividing by 2 and finding the remainder. If the remainder is 0, it means it's an even number. If the remainder is not 0, then it's an odd number. Okay. All right. 44, even number. 25, odd number. Can you see that, guys? Now, just want to show you something that's different. Now, remember, it can either be 0 or 1. Now, I want you to look at this condition. I want you to look at this condition. The remainder, if it's 0, it's an even number. Now, remember, I told you, if you divide any number by 2, the remainder is either going to be 0 or 1. Check this out. If the remainder does not equal to 1, so if it doesn't equal to 1, it must be 0. Can you see that, guys? So we could go and say if it's equal to 0 or if it does not equal to 1. And it's going to give me the same answers. Check it out. I said 44 first. It's even. And then I said 25. It's odd. Can you see that, guys? So there are two ways of actually writing that condition. Now, I'm going to go back and make it 0 equal, if it's equal to 0. Now, I'm going to show you something else. Can you see this additional variable remainder that we're using? Can you see that, guys? That represents that, yes or no? So instead of using another variable, what we can actually do is this, guys. I hope you are following this. If you're confused, put your hand up. Check this out. I get rid of one additional variable. Now, how does this actually work? What Python would do, it will evaluate this, the answer that it gets here if it's equal to the right hand side. Now remember, you're going to evaluate and then check if it's equal to the right hand side. So instead of using an additional variable, we can actually put the calculation right here in the if statement. So let's go and run it and see again. We'll try 44, 25 again. 44 and 25. Can you see that, guys? So this is a better way of actually doing it. Although if you want to use an additional remainder variable, you're more than welcome to do so. It's still going to be correct. It's still going to work. So just remember now, when you divide one number by another number, and if the first number is divisible by the second number, your remainder will always be 0. So I hope all of you are following that. Okay? Because we are going to go and look at, where's this? Here we go. Oh, no, it's not this one. Here we go. Factor. Check this out, guys. Read in two integer values and determine an output whether the second integer is a factor of the first integer. So what's the definition of a factor? A factor is any number that can go into another number with a 0 remainder. So if I had two numbers, like for example, just going to run this and show you, right? So let's assume I'm looking at the number 6. What are the factors of 6? The factors of 6 are 1, 2, 3, and 6. If I want to determine, now 3 is a factor. So 6, once again, we're using mod. 6 mod 3, 3 can go into 6 two times, remainder 0. Can you see that? So let's look at this statement and what exactly it means. Now, if the second number can go into the first number with a remainder of 0, it means that the second number is a factor of 6. So 3 is a factor of 6. You can look at it the other way. 6 is a multiple of 3. That means 3 times 3 multiplied by some number would give me 6. So 6, the first number, is a multiple of the second number, and the second number is a factor of the first number. Now just remember, a factor will always be either less than your first number or equal to your first number, but your factor cannot be bigger than the first number. All right. So since we're talking about this, let's assume, oh, sorry. Let's assume I said 6 mod 7. Can you tell me what the remainder is going to be? 7 can go into 6 how many times? 0 times. The remainder, guys, is 6. So if the second number, if you are modding if the first number by the second number, and the second number is bigger than the first number, then the first number is the remainder. But we'll look at more of that. So we are going to be looking at inputting our two numbers. Okay, so now 1 is assigned int input, enter the first value, and num2 is assigned int input. Oh, I'm just going to point this out to you. I hope you've been noticing what exactly I do when I put brackets. I actually put my open close and I go back in. Why do I do that? Because if I've got lots of brackets within each other, I might miss out a closed bracket and it's quite difficult to actually see. So that is why it's a good programming habit. When you're using quotes, put both your quotes, go back inside. You'll notice that I do that with my message variable. Brackets, put both, go back inside. So once again, open, close, go back in. And enter the second value. Okay. So let's look at our processing. Now, remember, I need to check whether if the second number is a factor of the first number. So I'm going to go message is assigned, an empty string. Now let's look at my if statement. If num1 mod num2 equals 0. That means if num1 can be divided by num2 and the remainder is 0, what does that mean? It means that num2 is a factor of plus str num1. Okay. Right. I hope that message makes sense to you. It's going to convert num2 to a string. It's going to join it. Remember the plus join strings. It will join it to is a factor of, and it'll convert num1 to a string and join it as well. Now, if the remainder does not equal to 0, then we need an else part. And what will our else part actually say? Remember, I told you this last week, that all your messages need to be user friendly. Is not a factor of num1. Okay. Output print. Okay, here we go. So let's go through this again. Reading in the first value, casting it to int. Reading in the second value, casting it to int. Message is assigned empty string. Message is assigned empty string. Now, if num1 mod num2 equals 0, it means that num2 is a factor of num1. If the remainder is not 0, then it's not a factor. So let's go and try 2 examples. Ready? Let's go with 72 and 6. 6 is a factor of 72 because 6 times 12 is 72, right? Let's go and try. Let's try 90 and 12. And no, it's not. 12 is not a factor, right? Let's go look at this example before. It's going to enter 6 and 3. And we know that 3 is a factor of 6 and 3 is a factor of 6. So it is important for you to understand, and guys, you are not going to go and reinvent the wheel. Anytime you need to find or determine whether one number is a factor of another number, we're going to be using mod. Now you'll notice that mod is an extremely useful arithmetic operator. All right. We do have other stuff to actually do, but let's go through these programs, and that's within range, multiple. Okay. Check the question out, guys. Now, what's a positive number? A positive number is greater than 0. A negative number is equal to 0. Sorry, negative number is less than 0. And a neutral number is equal to 0. So we can have 3 if statements, or I'm going to introduce something a little different. Now, remember, if our condition is true, right? If our condition is true, it will execute one part. If it's false, it'll go to the else part. Now, so far, we looked at if and we looked at else. Now, there is another part of the if statement, and I'm just going to show that to you very quickly. Right? Okay, this is the whoa, whoa. Wow, don't have that document here. Just give me a moment, guys. Okay, we'll have to just wing it. All right. This is what I'm talking about. Our normal if statement is if the condition, and then we come in over there and we have a statement. Right. Now, if the condition is false, I can have an else part, or I could use this. Guys, that reads as the elif. It actually means else if, and I can go and put another condition. check a different condition here. And if that is true, it will come and do this. Okay, it'll come and do that. Now, if this condition is false and that condition is false, then it will come to the else part and do that part. Okay. Whoa. Okay. Now you can have as many else if statements as you want. The else will be right at the end. So let's go and look at here. Here we go. Okay, I'm going to show you two different ways of actually doing this. The first way we're going to be looking at, well, now we remember we need to read in a number, right? So input and casting. So I'm going to go with is assigned int input enter an integer value. Okay. All right. Right now, I need to know if it's going to be positive, negative, or neutral. So once again, message is assigned empty string, and check it out. If num is greater than 0, what does that mean, guys? It means message is assigned string num plus is positive. I could have the next if statement saying if num is less than 0, then message is assigned string num plus is negative. If it's less than 0, it's a negative number. And lastly, if num equals 0, then message is assigned. I'm just going to change this to get a little bit more user friendly. Okay, here message the number is a neutral number, right? And then obviously we need our output and print MSG. Okay, so let's go run it. Okay, let's go into the number 4. 4 is a positive number, guys. Yep. Let's go and enter 0. It's a neutral number. And let's go and enter -6. And that is a negative number. Can you see that, guys? Now, I want you to look at this processing part. Okay. If you look at this processing part, we've got 3 if statements, which I'm actually going to comment out because I'm going to show you. Just go. I'm going to show you how to use the L if and how it actually works. So MSG is assigned empty string. So if num is greater than 0, then message is assigned string num plus is a positive number. Now, if it is not greater than 0, then I come here and say else if num is less than 0. If num is less than 0, then message is assigned plus is a negative number. Now, this is the best part. Guys, look at this here. How many conditions did I have? 1, 2, 3. Now, let's look at the logic here. Than 0, it will come here, it will never come here. If num is not greater than 0, then it'll come here. If num is less than 0, it'll come here. But what if num is not greater than 0 and it's not less than 0? That means, and this is where our else part comes in with one less condition. Message is assigned num plus is a neutral number. Okay, so what's going to happen over here is Python is going to evaluate 3 conditions, whereas here, if the first condition is true, it's going to come here. It will never see that. If the first condition is false, it will come here. And if this condition is true, it will come here and it will never see that. The only time it will come here is if that is false and that is false. Okay. And then obviously we got our print statement somewhere at the bottom there. Okay. So let's go and run this and see if it works the same. Okay. 7 is a positive number. It's a positive number. 0, it's a neutral number. That means it came to the else part. And lastly, -3, it's a negative number. Okay, so you can have as many if. Now, this is good programming because it will only come here if that is false. Now, if you look at here, if this is true, it will come here. Then Python will go and evaluate that. Then Python will go and evaluate that. And it's actually extra processing. So you need to understand that using the if, else makes more sense. And it's better programming. All right. So I hope all of you guys have followed what I've done. I hope you guys have downloaded Python and you're actually trying it. It's sad to say that 2 people emailed me and I sent them the link for the Python exercises. And I think that was, let's see, who's here? That was Al Renee. And you guys not here. The point is this, though, that she's working. All of you should be working. So come on, guys. I'm going to give you my email address again. And please email me. I'll send you the link. Because remember, you need to practice. I'm doing the work. You are watching. What you need to do is you need to try it out yourself because you'll make mistakes. We all make mistakes when we first learn to program, and you need to learn from those mistakes. All right. So since we looked at that, now we are going to be looking at nested if statements. Now, what does nested if statements actually mean? Nested if statements, nested, nest, inside. It basically means you have an if statement inside an if statement. All right, so let's look at this question and let's see if we can learn something from this. Read in an integer, determine in an output whether that value is between 12 and 20. What are the numbers between 12 and 20? Between means we don't take 12 into account, we don't take 20 into account. It's going to be 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. So let's read in our integer. Okay, num is assigned int input, enter an integer value. Okay, so we input. Then we look at processing. Now, between means it must be more than 12. More. What is the mathematical symbol for more? Greater than. So I'm going to come here. Message is assigned, right? Now, if num is greater than 12. Greater than 12 means it will be 13 upwards. Now, if it is greater than 12, if it is greater than 12, now I need to check if num is less than 20. Now, here's the thing. If num is greater than 12 and num is less than 20, it means message str num plus is with it is between 12 and 20. Now, this is the important thing. If I entered the number, now pay careful attention. If I enter the number 25, is 25 greater than 12? Yes. 20, okay, firstly, let's assume I entered 15. Is 15 greater than 12? Yes. It will come here. Is 15 less than 20? Yes. Then it'll come here. Now, if I entered 25, is 25 greater than 12? True. Then it's going to come here. Is 25 less than 20? True or false? 25 is not less than 20, so it can't come here. So, you see for this if statement here, for this if, we need an else for that if to say message is assigned str num plus is not between 12, and 20. Do you follow the logic there, guys? So if we enter 25, 25 is greater than 12, true, then it will come here. 25 is not less than 20. It's not going to come here. It's going to jump there. Now, let's look at another number. What if I enter the number 10? Is 10 greater than 12? True or false? It is false. So because it is false, it will never come in here. So which means for this if statement, we need another else. Message is assigned str num plus is not between 12 and 20. Okay, now I looked at 3 possible values because we need to take every possibility into account. There is an easier way of actually doing this program, people, right? And we are going to be looking at that tomorrow. So let's go and run this very quickly. Okay. What was the error? Oh, you know what the problem was? This else was not in line with that if. This else was not in line with that if. Remember I told you about indentation yesterday? Okay. So let's go into the number 15. What am I missing, guys? Print MSG. Okay. So let's enter the number 15. 15 is between. Let's go into the number 25, I said. 25, not between. And let's go into the number 10, not between. Do you follow this, guys? Right? Now, it is important for you to understand what this code is doing. I'm going to go through this again tomorrow. Now, remember, my email address is nay at 731 at africateengeeks.co.za. So please, guys, get a hold of me so that I can send you the link to the exercises. All right. Thank you so much. Have a good afternoon, and we will meet tomorrow at 2. All right. Thank you.